The year is 1592. Along the southern coast of a small peninsula, thousands of ships appear on the horizon like a dark tide rolling toward the shore. Fire erupts across fishing villages. Fortress walls that stood for centuries crumble under cannon fire. Families run through burning streets, clutching what little they can carry, uncertain if they will see each other again by nightfall. This is not the beginning of Korea's story. It is one of its darkest chapters. But to understand how a kingdom found itself facing annihilation, and how it survived, we have to go back. Back past the invasions, past the golden ages, past the fall of empires and the rise of new ones. We have to go back to the very beginning. This is the story of Korea through the ages. Long before written records, before kings and courts, the Korean peninsula was home to hunter-gatherers who crossed into this rugged land tens of thousands of years ago. Archaeological evidence found in places like Goguryeo and Hangul shows that human life took root here during the Paleolithic era, with communities slowly evolving as the millennia passed. By the Neolithic period, roughly 6,000 years before our time, distinct pottery cultures emerged. Most famously the Julman culture, known for its comb pattern pottery, a signature that still helps archaeologists trace the earliest identity of this land. But identity, as we will see again and again in this story, is never simple. It is forged. It is tested. And it is nearly lost more than once. Around the second millennium BCE, bronze technology arrived, bringing with it more organized societies, agriculture, and the first hints of political structure. And from this transformation rose something remarkable: the legendary kingdom of Gojoseon, considered the first Korean state. According to later Korean historical texts, Gojoseon's origins are wrapped in foundation mythology involving a semi-divine founder. While historians treat this founding myth as cultural legend rather than literal history, what is certain is this: by the 4th century BCE, Gojoseon was a real, organized kingdom with trade networks, fortified settlements, and enough military strength to draw the attention, and eventually conflict, of neighboring Chinese states. In 108 BCE, that conflict reached its breaking point. The mighty Han Dynasty of China invaded, and after fierce resistance, Gojoseon fell. Its collapse sent shockwaves through the peninsula. But this was only the beginning. From the ashes of Gojoseon, new political entities began to rise across the peninsula and into Manchuria. Small tribal confederacies grew into kingdoms. And by the first centuries of the Common Era, 3 powers emerged that would shape Korean history for the next 700 years. Goguryeo in the north, Baekje in the southwest, and Silla in the southeast. If you're fascinated by forgotten history like this, now would be a great moment to subscribe, because what happened between these 3 kingdoms is one of the most dramatic sagas in East Asian history. Goguryeo was a warrior kingdom, fierce and expansive, stretching deep into Manchuria and clashing repeatedly with Chinese dynasties to its north. Its armies were feared. Its fortresses were engineering marvels. When the Sui dynasty of China attempted to invade in the early 7th century with what some historical accounts describe as over 1 million soldiers, Goguryeo's general Yulji Mundeok orchestrated a devastating ambush at the Battle of Salsu, annihilating the invading force. It was one of the greatest military upsets in ancient history, a moment when a smaller kingdom humbled an empire. But greatness has a cost. Years of warfare weakened Goguryeo, and internal succession struggles slowly eroded its strength. What happened next changed everything. To the south, Baekje flourished as a cultural bridge, forging strong maritime trade relationships with China and playing a crucial role in transmitting Buddhism and continental culture to Japan. Its artistry, architecture, and refined court culture made it one of the most sophisticated societies of its time. And then there was Silla, smaller, often overshadowed, tucked into the southeastern corner of the peninsula. For a long time, Silla appeared to be the weakest of the three kingdoms. No one could have predicted what happened next. Silla made a fateful decision. It allied with Tang China, one of the most powerful empires in the world at the time. Together, they launched a devastating campaign, first crushing Baekje in 660 CE, and then turning against the once mighty Goguryeo, which finally fell in 668 CE. For the first time in history, the Korean peninsula stood united under a single ruling power, the Unified Silla Kingdom. But unification did not simply mean unity. Silla now had to remove its former ally, Tang China, from Korean soil, a task it accomplished through years of difficult warfare. And with that struggle behind it, Korea entered what many historians consider one of its most brilliant cultural eras. Buddhism flourished. Magnificent temples like Bulguksa and the Seokguram Grotto were carved into the mountainsides, monuments that still leave visitors speechless today. Art, poetry, and Buddhist philosophy reached extraordinary heights. Silla's capital, Gyeongju, became one of the great cities of Asia. But golden ages, in this story, never last forever. By the 9th century, Silla's central authority began to crumble under aristocratic infighting and peasant uprisings. Regional warlords rose to challenge the throne, and the peninsula fractured once again into what historians call the later Three Kingdoms period. Out of this chaos, a new leader emerged, Wang Geon, who unified the fractured territories and, in 918 CE, founded a new dynasty that would give Korea the very name the world recognizes it by today, Goryeo. The Goryeo Dynasty ushered in remarkable achievements. It refined the civil service examination system, expanded Buddhist scholarship, and created one of the most extraordinary technological achievements in human history. The world's first movable metal type printing, developed decades before Gutenberg's press in Europe. The Tripitaka Koreana, a complete Buddhist scripture carved onto over 80,000 wooden blocks, remains one of the most awe-inspiring cultural treasures ever produced by human hands, created as an act of faith during a time of desperate crisis. That crisis had a name, the Mongols. In the 13th century, the Mongol Empire, the most feared military force the world had ever seen, turned its attention toward Korea. Wave after wave of invasion tore through Goryeo's defenses. Cities burned. The royal court fled to Gangwon Island for protection, resisting for decades. But resistance came at an enormous cost, and eventually Goryeo was forced into submission, becoming a tributary state under Mongol influence for nearly a century. This was a period of humiliation, adaptation, and quiet endurance, but also survival. And through survival, Korea preserved its identity, even under the shadow of the most powerful empire on earth. If you enjoy discovering the resilience hidden within history, take a moment and tell us in the comments which era of Korean history surprises you the most, because what happened next was nothing short of a complete transformation. As Mongol power declined in the 14th century, a brilliant and ambitious general named Yi Seongjai rose through the ranks of the Goryeo military. In 1388, after refusing to invade Ming China as ordered, he turned his army back and seized power. In 1392, he founded a new dynasty, one that would rule Korea for over 5 centuries. This was the birth of the Joseon Dynasty. Joseon transformed Korea's very foundation. Confucianism replaced Buddhism as the guiding philosophy of the state, reshaping education, family structure, and government. Kings like Sejong the Great rose to legendary status, most famously for creating Hangul in 1443, a scientifically designed writing system built to give ordinary Korean people, not just the elite, the ability to read and write. It remains one of the most celebrated linguistic achievements in world history. Joseon flourished for 2 centuries, advancing science, astronomy, medicine, and the arts. But history was about to take an unexpected turn. In 1592, Japan, unified under the ambitious warlord Toyotomi Hideyoshi, launched a massive invasion of Korea, aiming to use the peninsula as a pathway to conquer Ming China. This was the devastating war we witnessed at the very beginning of our story, the Imjin War. Cities burned. Countless lives were lost. Yet in the midst of catastrophe, one of history's greatest naval commanders emerged, Admiral Yi Sun-sin. Using his ingeniously designed turtle ships, he won victory after victory at sea, most famously at the Battle of Myeongnyang, where his fleet of just 13 ships defeated a Japanese armada of over 100. His brilliance helped save Korea from total conquest. But the wounds of war ran deep, and the worst was yet to come. Decades later, in the 17th century, Joseon faced invasions from the rising Qing dynasty of Manchuria, forcing Korea into a humiliating submission. Yet even after these devastating blows, Joseon endured, entering long periods of cultural preservation and cautious isolation, earning the nickname the Hermit Kingdom as it limited contact with the outside world to protect its identity and independence. For centuries, Korea held firm to this ancient way of life. But by the 19th century, the world outside was changing rapidly, with foreign powers pressing at its borders, seeking access, influence, and control. Korea's long isolation was coming to an end, and the peninsula was about to enter one of the most turbulent chapters of its long history, a period of dramatic transformation that would test its identity like never before. We won't cover every chapter of that transformation today, because that is a story that deserves its own telling. But what remains true, across every era we have witnessed, is this: Korea has been invaded, divided, humiliated, and pushed to the edge of destruction more times than most nations in human history. And yet, in every single instance, it rebuilt. It preserved its language when empires tried to erase it. It preserved its culture when armies tried to conquer it. It preserved its identity when history itself seemed determined to bury it. From the ancient hunters who first crossed into this rugged peninsula, to the kings who forged kingdoms, to the scholars who created a writing system for the people, to the admirals and soldiers who refused to let their homeland disappear, this is not simply a story of survival. It is a story of resilience carried across thousands of years, passed down through generations who refused to let go of who they were. And as we stand at the edge of this journey, looking back across dynasties risen and fallen, wars fought and endured, cultures built and rebuilt from ashes, one truth remains unshaken: some nations are defined by their power. Korea is defined by its endurance. If this journey through time moved you, like this video, subscribe for more deep dives into the history that shaped our world, and let us know in the comments what part of Korea's story you'll be thinking about long after this video ends.